you have to understand, like, you may do something and be completely unsuccessful at it, and then you're still gonna grow from that, so, like, you're still gonna get benefit out of it, and then, like, that's not the thing you wanna do rather than, like, procrastinating about it for 3 years and then, like, way down the line figuring out that you're not passionate. So, like, it's really more just throwing yourself out there until you find something that you really love and that you really think could, like, be a future for you. So, that was kind of the mindset I took.
That is Nick Keller. This week on the Do It For Yourself podcast. Hello, my friend. Welcome back to another episode here on the Do It For Yourself podcast. My name is Ian. I am your host. This is my podcast. Thank you for coming by. My guest this week is Nick Keller. And before I get into a little bit about Nick's story, I just want to ask you right up front for a quick favor. If you could, leave me a review on whatever app it is that you are using to consume this podcast. I would greatly appreciate it, and it's going to help me out a ton. My guest, Nick Keller, is in the early stages of doing it for himself when it comes to his whole story. Nick was all consumed when it came to football, and that was his passion. That was what he was completely consumed with, and he put everything that he had into football. And there was one problem. He was injured, and it got to the point where he could not play football any longer. And so Nick had to come up with a way that he could stay connected to football without being able to play himself. And so Nick began training athletes that are in middle school, high school, and had aspirations of playing for those teams, maybe going on past high school, playing at the college level. And this was a way for him to stay connected to the sport, even though he couldn't play. And so we get into his training of athletes, how that helped him get through this rough spot, but also how he's still continuing on to go to college and not building this coaching business into something that could potentially become his career. He's keeping this on the side, but he's also exploring other options because he has the ability to do that right now. He has the ability to taste and try things. And so that in and of itself is how Nick is doing it for himself. So I hope that you enjoy this interview. I'm looking forward to sharing it with you. And without further ado, here is my interview with Nick. If you're all good, I'm all good. We can get rolling.
Yeah, let's do it.
So, Nick, I just want to take a minute and say thanks for jumping on the Do It For Yourself podcast with me tonight. I know that you, just like everybody else, is trying to manage some of the weird stuff that's going on, and
Mhm.
you just finished up your finals, but some of your I mean, not even some of, I'm sure all of your finals and a majority of the end of your semester was not completed the way that you've been used to. So how's everything going for you? And, what was that like for that little transition there, and what's going on?
Yeah, so, it's been going pretty well. First off, thanks for having me on. Glad to be here. But, yeah, it's definitely been different. I've kind of talked to a lot of my friends about it, and it's almost kinda like the college workload without the college experience. You're doing the same amount of homework, you're doing the same amount of work, but you're not getting to, like, go see all your friends. And even just, like, in classes and stuff, it's just so different, like, being home and not being able to be, like, as much of, like, a in-person social guy. So I've kinda had to figure out ways to still find that FaceTime people, things like that. But it's definitely a huge adjustment, and it's just crazy how like this impacts literally everything. So.
Yeah, it's crazy, and I was talking with some people the other day, and I think, you know, the thing that I feel the worst about for, some of the kids and stuff who are going through this is that, yeah, they're losing out on graduation, which when you're a high school senior, it is a big deal, to walk across the stage and stuff like that. But I think some of the things that they're missing out on that people aren't thinking about that I actually mentioned this to the person I was talking with. He's like, "Oh yeah, well what about, graduation prom?" And I said, "Yeah, that stuff, it's going to suck to miss out on that, but what about senior week?" Like,
Mhm.
can you imagine graduating and you've been I mean, cuz I know for me personally, like when we were planning our senior week, we literally started planning that in, like, December,
Yeah,
January, and it wasn't until
yeah.
June, you know? So, like, those are the kinds of things that I think are, they're really gonna miss out on, and who knows,
Mhm.
hopefully, maybe they can get back to it, but it's definitely, uh it's definitely an interesting time.
Yeah, it is. It's insane.
And so that kind of leads into the what I wanted to start with, and that's, you're in college right now,
Mhm.
and so before we get into your college, I want to track it back a little bit to, um, your middle school and high school days, and your heavy focus on football. Football was your sport. You loved
Mhm.
football, and I mean, it was eat, sleep, breathe type of
Yeah.
football, and I know down in Texas, football is really, really big down there. Like high school football, college football is huge down there. So,
Mhm.
talk to me a little bit about how you got into football and some of the things that you were doing.
Yeah, so, football for me, I remember being just like a little kid and, watching, like, the college football championship and just, college football was always, like, really the main thing I watched, and, I remember just dreaming, I was like, "That's gonna be me one day, that's gonna be me one day," and I was that kid, I would just run out my backyard, I'd be throwing the football, things like that. So from a really early age, kind of, like, developed that passion for it and stuff. Um, but, like, I would say it was probably my 7th grade year. I was a naturally just, like, very, like, skinny kid, and, like, skinny, like, can kinda sound good depending on the context, but, like, as far as, like, football and stuff, you wanna have, like, some muscle on you. Um, so 7th grade was the year that I really just, like, went all out and, started working out, started like, literally would come home and I was just, like, either doing football, like, workouts or, like, something like that. So that was really when I started putting kind of the effort behind my passion. So 7th, 8th grade did that. Then I remember, so I quarterback was always like my dream position to play. Then I got to my freshman year of high school, and we just had like a stacked team. We would blow out every team like 50-0, crazy stuff like that. And they had another quarterback that year, so they put me at safety. And still, same thing every single day after school, I would still go and throw with the receivers. I remember even before the games, like if we weren't, I played safety my freshman year, and if we weren't like talking about safety stuff, I'd go and sneak over and just kind of sit by where the quarterbacks were and listen to what the coaches were telling them. Like I was that kid that just like that's all I could think about. Like how can I like better myself? How can I put myself in a better position to like eventually be that quarterback? So then I remember one time freshman year, one of the coaches came up to me and he was like, "Hey, why are you doing all this like quarterback work? We saw you throwing outside. Like, what's going on with that?" And I was like, "That's just what I want to play. Like, I'm willing to do whatever it takes to get that." So then my sophomore year, finally got the opportunity to like play quarterback, um, and was like loving it. Was finally like getting what I'd been like working for and everything. And then it was going into our 5th game of the season, and that morning, we had this guy. So I think our head coach had said something about I was playing soft that day or something. I don't remember, but anyways, so then my response was like in my head, I was like, I'm about to run somebody over. We had this like 6'6", like 320-pound dude, and at the time I was probably 6'2", 160 or something, like half this dude's weight. And I dipped my head down and tried to run him over and got like laid out. And my friend was actually talking to me about it the other day, and I didn't even know this, but apparently there was some big D1 school there to watch him, and they left as soon as he did that because they felt like it was like so disrespectful, like how hard he hit me because I was like this little sophomore or whatever. So I didn't even know about that. But anyways, was having headaches like all that day. Like after that, and then I was in class later that day, and my vision just starts like kind of like spinning and stuff for like 10 seconds or so. And what I ended up finding out way later is I think it was like a minor seizure, but at the time I had no idea that's what it was. I was just like, "What was that?" You know what I mean? Um, so then played in the game that day, um, dislocated my thumb in the game, and then went and got like a little cast for that, and then I was still gonna be able to play with the cast because it was on my left hand. So then that next Monday at practice, rolled out, and then one of the corners picked me up, threw me down. I landed on my neck and got up from that, and that was the first time like I knew I had a concussion. And like looking back on it, like now that I've done like a bunch of research on it, I've probably had like a ton of like little minor concussions before that.
Mhm.
But that was the first time like got up and like people were talking to me, I couldn't hear them. Went over to the coach to like get the next play, and he said my eyes were just shaking back and forth. He was like, "You need to go get checked out." So, anyways, ended up being out the rest of the season with that. Um, and then as soon as like my symptoms started to get better and stuff, the season was over, but got back into working out and everything. And I think a big part of it was just kind of like not doing anything for so long, and then all of a sudden just jumping full force into it. Ended up tearing my hip flexor while we were working out, and that was like a whole like 10-week period. The first like 2 weeks of it, couldn't even like sit down in class, had to stand in my classes. Then kind of got through that, and then all of a sudden my concussion symptoms randomly just start coming back again. I'm back to going to school, coming home, laying in a dark room. So then my parents are like freaking out. I'm getting like MRI scans. I'm going to like all these different like neurologists and eye doctors and like all sorts of stuff like that. And all the scans would come back completely normal, but then I'm still having all these symptoms. Um, and then they kind of faded again, and then they came back again over the summer. And then my parents were finally like, "All right, you're done with football." And I remember like walking into our field house, like where we practice, and having to tell the coaches that like I was quitting, and that was literally like one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. And for the next year, kind of had like on and off concussion symptoms. Um, but like the crazy thing was like the hardest part about it was like not having football. It wasn't like you hear about like I had like almost 2 years of like just concussion symptoms and would like come home, lay in a dark room, all this stuff. Like the not playing football was 1,000 times harder than that for me because, like, my whole life, it was like, "This is my dream. This is what I'm working for. This is my passion." And even if I had never gotten that, just the, like, pursuit of it was where I got so much happiness. So then once that was kind of, like, taken out of my life, it was just a big reality hit, like, that it really made me realize that, like, that was the center of my life, and that was kind of, like, what I identified in. Um, and I would say I grew a ton as a person, like, throughout that year, and it just kinda made me realize, like, all these things like football, it's a platform for you to be able to like make an impact and stuff, but it's not the only like there's always other options out there. There's always other things you can pursue, put your time into, make a difference with. Um, so after that, I kind of knew I was like, I want to find something else that I'm that passionate about. Um, but it's just hard, like being in high school. It's not like you have that many options of like things to just go and like pursue and like put crazy time into or whatever. So like I joined the basketball team, did that for a little bit, and like it was okay, but just didn't have that same kind of passion for it. Um,
So you were
and
like you were allowed to play other sports,
yeah,
you just couldn't continue playing football?
yeah. So I technically like for really from the doctors, it was more of just like a it's up to you, but like the risk reward of playing football at this point, like with how many times you get hit in the head, just isn't worth it. With basketball, you don't really run into as much of a concussion worry. Um, so it just like that wasn't as much of a concern. But like with football, you're literally going head to head almost every play, and all it would take is one of those hits to be weird again, and I could mess up my head for the rest of my life.
Mhm.
So yeah, I played basketball, and that was fun, but wasn't really like just didn't have that like insane passion for it the way I did football. Um, And I'd always, like, wanted to start my own company. I remember even my junior year, me and my friend like started this little website thing, kind of messed around with it for a little bit, and then it kind of like fell off. But then, so then my senior year, I started getting into training like middle school and high school football athletes. I had about 3 kids that I would train every week, every other week, something like that, and like loved that. That was kind of a way for me to like stay involved in football and like also just like help other people like achieve a dream that like I wanted to achieve. Because I remember growing up, like the personal trainer I had, he had a huge impact on like not only me as like a football player, but me as like a person. So me being able to be that for someone else was just like really cool. Then I got to college and like continued training athletes in college. But then college, there's just so many more like opportunities and things you can pursue. Especially at a big college like A&M, where there's just like so much to get involved in. Um, so joined like an organization on campus and everything. And then actually let me backtrack a little bit. So my senior year, there was a guy and he was the starting quarterback at the college that I was at A&M, which is where I go to college now. But I was playing Xbox with him and he was telling me about how he got interviewed on this podcast. And before this, I was like I knew what a podcast was, but wasn't like didn't even know who Joe Rogan was, like wasn't informed about like podcasts at all. And he told me about this podcast he was on. I checked it out and I was like, oh, this is really cool. They were having like all the like athletes from that school on and like all these like pretty big people and like all with interesting stories. So anyways, ended up DMing the guy who ran the podcast and was like, hey, like I love what you're doing. I think this is really cool stuff, but like maybe you should try this, and just gave him like a bunch of like things he could be doing differently um to like kind of get his podcast out there. And he hit me back and was like, and so this guy was also a football player on the team, and then he had a bunch of injuries and stuff, and I think had to stop playing. But that's how he had all these like connections and stuff. So, anyways, he responded and was like, "Dude, like I love all your ideas. What would your thoughts of like working together be?" So I was like, "Yeah, that'd be awesome." So I drove up to College Station, which is where A&M's at, and met with him. We talked for like 2 3 hours, and it was just really cool to kind of like pick his brain and like even just he kind of went through a similar thing as me as far as like and it was probably even harder for him getting all the way to the college level where like you've almost made it. He like had plans of going to the NFL and then all of a sudden all it takes is like a snap of a finger and your whole football career is over. Um so we talked for a while and basically we decided he was gonna like run this podcast. I was gonna do like all the marketing and like social media for it. And then we had another guy that was gonna produce it and we were gonna like each have like a third of it. And then ended up taking like a job somewhere else and didn't really end up doing it. But then I was hooked on this whole podcast thing. And um so for probably like a year, I would say, I was just constantly like saying I was gonna do it, but like I didn't really realize this at the time. But I would say the biggest reason that I didn't start it was just like deep, deep down, you're kind of worrying like, okay, if I put this out there, what are people going to think? Or like, you know what I mean? And it's not even something you realize that's why you're not doing it at the time. But like looking back on it, that's definitely what it was. Um, but finally, my second semester of college ended up starting this podcast, and that's just been something that's like been super cool. I've gotten to meet a bunch of really cool people, tell my story, hear have other people tell their stories. And that's one of those things, like, I've always wanted to start a company. I love meeting new people. I love hearing people's stories. I love being able to make an impact. So it just kind of encompasses all those things. And I'm sure you've kind of like realized that too, doing your podcast and everything. Um, but yeah, so it's really just from football, I've learned like that there's other things you can like find that same like passion and like there's always other things you can pursue. But it just takes you like really putting yourself out there and like trying these things. Because I would say like the majority of people wouldn't be willing to just like start training like middle school and high school athletes. Like, how do you even get into that? But it's just one of those things you just have to do it, and then you're gonna screw up, but like you end up learning from those experiences and just growing like a ton. So it's been super cool.
So one of the things that you talked about when you were talking about your high school football days and you were at safety, but you wanted to be the quarterback, and that's
Mhm.
exactly you wanted to be the quarterback, and you were gonna do whatever you could to be the quarterback. You were out there practicing, you were throwing, you were doing this, you were doing that. Um, you put forth this work ethic, and
Mhm.
you put it out there. Not you didn't, like, go to the coach and say, "Hey, this is what I want," right? You just
Yeah.
went out and you let your actions speak.
Mhm.
As cliche as it is, you let your actions speak louder than your words. And so then the coach came to you, but where or how was that work ethic instilled in you? Was that something that your parents instilled in you, or was it that your parents led by example and you could see them working and
I
doing things
I
like that? Like, where did that come from?
honestly, and I've had so many people ask me this. I remember, I worked at a moving company, one summer, and I remember our manager there, he would just always, like, ask me that same thing because he had just like, even something like that, I was just that kid, like, we'd get out there, and I'd just be running back and forth to the truck, like, loading stuff in there because like, anything I do, I just, like if I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna go all in on it, but I really don't know, like, where like, I would say both my parents are, like, driven people, but it's not really something they've, like, constantly preached on me or, like, that I think it really just came down to, uh, like, anytime somebody asks me what my biggest fear is, like, my biggest fear is, like, being old one day and looking back on my life and wishing that I made more of an impact or, like, did more with my life. So and, like and I don't really know if that's what I was, like, thinking about at a young age. I know now that's why I'm, like, trying all these different things and, like, everything I do is, like, with all of my heart. Maybe at a young age with football, it was more just, like, I grew up watching football and, like, that was a dream. I was like, I want to make it to college football, and I knew how hard that was going to be. So even like being a freshman at safety, I knew that if I worked every single day at quarterback, and honestly, like my plan, if I hadn't gotten switched to quarterback, was I wanted to get on varsity for safety first, and then start working quarterback. Like I was like, if I can get on varsity first, I can get colleges to start looking at me, and then when I go to these recruiting camps, I can work quarterback for them. Like I was perfectly fine if I'd never played a snap of quarterback in high school, but I still wanted to play like it was just this like whatever route I have to take to get there, I was willing to do it. So it's just like putting myself in the best place to achieve that dream. But I really don't know like exactly where it comes from because I know it's not like a normal thing, especially like middle school to be like where that's all I could think about is like every second I'm not working, somebody else is. But that's just kind of like I guess how I'm wired. I don't know.
I think it's a normal thing to think about in middle school and high school to think about, okay, this is what I want, right? Like I want this and that whatever it is that you want, it completely just encompasses all of your thoughts, all of your like it's just everything. It just completely consumes you, right? But I think
Hmm.
that the difference is and the difference between what you were doing and what maybe most people in that age bracket do is you were taking the action, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like there are some other people out there like you who do that, right? But
Oh yeah, for sure.
sometimes it seems like there's also an outside force that's leading them to that, right? It's their dad who played at that high level when he was their age, or it's their parent who's putting them in the position. They're getting them in the camps, they're getting them in the workouts, they're getting them in all the extra stuff because the parent knows that's what needs to happen. But
Hmm.
I wanted to see if it was your parents who were saying like, "Hey, if you wanna be the quarterback, like, this is what you have to do," and your dad was out there working with you, or if this was just something that was completely internal and you were like, "Well."
No, I would say it was completely internal. I remember, being in 7th grade, even the personal trainer I got, I was this little middle schooler and looked up the personal trainer's number on Google and called him, and I was like, "Hey, I wanna train with you. I'm gonna give you my parents' numbers. If you can talk to them, I'll convince them, like, let's do this." Or, like, I remember we'd go on a camping trip or something, and I was that kid, like, me and all my friends would be hanging out, and, at one point during the night, I'd sneak out and go do, like, a workout, like, in some random spot in the camping spot, or, like, um, just, like, things like that, like, it was just, like, it would bother me so much if, like, there was there was some day that, like, I didn't do anything to, like, better myself for that dream, but I really wouldn't say it was, I definitely have great parents, and they've raised me so well, and maybe it was just more of a character thing, but it was never like a, "You're gonna go and do this, like, if you want this, you need to, like, work for it." They were more just, like, they were supportive of whatever I did, but it wasn't ever, like, a forced thing, you know what I mean?
Mhm. Yeah. And there's always, then there's always the flip side of it, right? And the flip side of it is the parent who's living vicariously through the son or daughter,
Mhm.
and who's pushing them to do things that they don't really wanna do. Like,
Exactly.
it's just
Yeah.
not like, dad played football, and so now son's playing football, and son doesn't like football at all, but he's just doing it to please his dad, like, up until the point where he just finally flips out and is like, "I don't wanna do this, like, I hate this,"
Yeah.
right? So, the next kind of piece of that story that I wanna get into was that this was something that was such a huge, huge part of your life, and obviously, I'm sure that you could remember the day that you had to walk into the field house, and I think that there's something that's very interesting to me, the way that you worded it, and it was that you had to walk into the field house and tell your coaches that you were quitting. Not that you couldn't play anymore, or that it was suggested even that you not play anymore. So, why is it that you worded it that way and said that you had to tell your coaches that you were quitting?
I maybe quitting wasn't the best word because for me, honestly, like, the way I worded it to my, head coach was my doctors and my parents, like, both came to the conclusion that it's just, like, it was one of those things I knew it was the right decision, but I hated the decision. So, like, that's basically the way I worded it to my coaches was, like, "This is like, this is what they're telling me to do, and I agree it's the right decision, but, like, if I could do anything to be playing football, like, I'd do it." Um, but it's just one of those things, like, when you look at people, like, there's, like, all these NFL athletes, and they'll go to, like, their daughter's soccer game and come home from it and not remember it. Like, when it could have long term, like, for the rest of your, like, life impacts, it just gets to a certain point, and I remember, there was a quarterback camp that I would always go to, and I can't remember the guy's name, but, one of the coaches there, every year, he would tell us the same thing. He'd be like, "Regardless of if it's in middle school or high school or college or in the NFL, your football career is gonna come to an end one day." Like, no matter how far you get, no matter how successful you are, no matter how well you take care of your body, it's gonna come to an end one day. So what you need to figure out is, like, where is your identity, and, like, I is all you're about football, or is football just, like, one of those passions that you're pursuing and that you're using to, like, make an impact? And I think he worded it a little bit better than I did just there, but I think you kinda, like, at least get the gist of it. Just, like, there's other things out there, and you're gonna end up having to find those things at one point. So I just kind of hit that point and, like, knew that for me it was the right decision. And honestly, for me, it wasn't even like even when I had to stop playing, I still for a long time was like, okay, maybe next year, like when my symptoms are better, I'll start playing again. And like senior year, there was like a couple months period where I was like training my butt off, and I was thinking about like walking on, and but, like when I got to college. But it's just one of those things. It's so scary because the brain's one of those weird things where I could play and be perfectly fine and like achieve all my dreams and stuff, or I could play and literally first day of like a practice or something get hit and mess myself up for the rest of my life. Um, so it's just one of those risks that I wasn't really willing to take. So I wouldn't say for me it was quitting because I still had that like burning passion for the game. And if it was something like a leg or an arm, I totally would still be playing. It's just when it's your head, and that could like impact how you think or how you like it's just not worth it at that point.
So I actually did a podcast with a girl whose name's Amanda Picarilli Hall, and she was a soccer player, and she did play in college, but she kind of went through the same almost like identity crisis when she couldn't play soccer anymore. And she had a really great way of wording it too. And she's like, soccer, it it's part of me, but it's not all of me, right? Like
Exactly.
it's not, it was something that was a part of my life, but it doesn't have to be my entire life.
Mhm.
And so she, worded it very, very well. And I think it's something that, now she looks back and she had a great, career playing soccer through high school and college, but that's now led her to some different things in some different sports, and now she's into triathlon, and she's, into running, and she's into
Yeah.
supporting other people, and so she's part of that same, like, team environment that she had gotten when she was playing soccer, but it's a little bit different now.
Mhm.
And so the other thing that I wanted to talk with you about is you were and are training athletes,
Mhm.
and this is a link that is still keeping you tied to football. So
Yeah.
even though you are not able to play football, you still have this link to football, and you still have this ability to work with athletes. So how important has that been to work with the athletes, and how has that kind of kept you, or kept football, a part of your life even though you can't play?
Yeah, it's been huge and it's been super cool. It's just like I would honestly I get, like, paid to do it, so it's like a cool little side job, but, like, I would totally do it for free. Like, it's one of those things that, like, and I probably spent more money on equipment than I've made doing it, because like, every single time I get money, I'm like, "Oh, well, like, if I this for this kid, like, that's gonna help him." It's more about just, like, helping these kids achieve it. Like, I know how bad I wanted, like, that dream and everything, so if I can help somebody else do that and, like, also be, like, a positive, like, role model for, like, a younger kid, like, I just think that's, like, more valuable than, like, any amount of money I could ever make doing something like that would be, like, it I think my life's just very big on, like, my purpose and, like, what impact I'm making, and, like, it's just been a super cool way to do that, and I've learned a lot from it, like, not only just, like, actual, like, training athletes and, like, things about, like, the position and everything, but, like, also just, like, how to be a leader, like, how to, like, motivate, like, these kids and everything, so I've gotten a lot out of it, it's been super cool.
And on the flip side of that, you had a trainer that you really enjoyed working with. So
Mhm.
was that another part of it? Like, you had this person that you really enjoyed, and it was a great role model for you. So did you look at that person and say, "Wow, this person has given me so much. Like, I want to turn around, and give this back."
Yeah, no, for sure, and the guy who used to train me, I've gone back to him multiple times since I mean, like, I remember the day I quit, I went to him and he was kinda talking me through it and, like, why it was the right decision, and, there have been multiple times even since then, like, throughout high school that I would text him because, like, that was literally probably the toughest thing I've gone through was, like, and it sounds crazy because like, in high school, any of my friends, when they had to quit playing football, it was just like, "Alright, I'm done playing football," but, like, for me, that was, like, my life, that was, like, my identity, which probably wasn't a good thing looking back on it that that was, like, my identity, but it was. Um, so right when I quit that, it was like, "Okay, well, what am I doing now?" Um, so just the impact he had on me while we were training and even after, um, was huge. So for me to think that, like, I could be even, like, a percentage of that for somebody else was, super cool.
Now you go on to college, right? And you're still training athletes and coaching them, but you do not decide to go for any sort of kinesiology degree, and you don't decide to go for any sort of business degree. Um, you kind of go for something that's completely out of the whole coaching scenario. So
Yeah.
talk to me a little bit about why you have this completely different plan for your college degree.
Yeah, so for me, basically going into college, I was looking at either engineering, kines, or some sort of business degree. And the reason I was looking at each one, engineering has been something I've always like also kind of been passionate about. Kines, obviously, like with football, and like honestly, I think if I would have made it to college football, I would have gone and been a college coach. But my thing with going and getting a degree and like planning on being a coach was a lot of times you have to start out in the middle school and high school route, and I just didn't have like really interest in being a teacher. Like I just wasn't very passionate about that, and then like that wouldn't be fair to like the students I was teaching, and like so I just didn't feel like that was the right route. And it's all about connections. Like if I'd made it to college, then I think that's a route I might have pursued. Um, but with kines, like I'm training these athletes right now. I listen to like fitness podcasts all the time. There's actually like a thing I'm about to sign up for, and it's kind of like a little online class thing that I'm gonna like do over the summer. So I feel like I can still get so much like education on that, and there's so many different YouTube videos and podcasts and all sorts of things out there that you can find. So I'm still able to like educate myself and pursue that passion. Um, and then for the business, I, I just felt like the only reason I wanted to do a business degree was like because I knew eventually I wanted to go the entrepreneurial route and like start my own company. But from what I've heard is there's just so much in like the education of business right now that's just like especially for like the entrepreneurial route. Like if I was going to be like a CEO or like something like that, that's different. But like to start your own company, there's it's just very outdated right now, and a lot of it's kind of trial and error. And again, a lot of it you can kind of like find out there and kind of self educate yourself on with engineering. You really can't like end up being an engineer without going to school for that. And A&M, the school I wanted to go to, is one of the top 10 engineering schools in the nation. So I just felt like, as far as like getting the most bang for my buck, and like that being like the one thing that if I wanted to do, I for sure had to go to school for it. It made the most sense. And then if I'm in college or out of college and I start training athletes and it turns into this huge thing, then yeah, I could drop whatever I'm doing with engineering and go for full force on that. Or if I this podcast I'm doing, um, after I like if it ends up taking off and I end up making a bunch of money from that and I want to go full force on that, I can do that. I like have my own company and like I'm pursuing that. So it really just that was the one option that I looked at to where it wasn't eliminating anything, and it also wasn't like putting me in a position where like I felt like one of my passions was like less likely to be able to happen, if that makes sense.
So, uh, and we talked about this when we talked
Uh-huh.
before we started recording, but um, when someone, not all the time, but sometimes when someone's doing it for themselves or they have this passion, this dream, this thing that they want to do, it it's that's it. Like it's one thing. They're laser focused on that one thing. So,
Mhm.
how important has it been for you at the place and the time where you are in your life? How important has it been to be able to try this and try that, try coaching? You had football, but for one reason or another, this this was something that was out of your control, but football was taken off the table. So you can't
Yeah.
go the football route, but you have coaching, which still keeps you connected, but then you also have engineering, which is something that you're passionate about. So like, how important has that been for you to be able to, and I'm sure those weren't the only things that you tried, like, I'm sure you tried other things, you considered
Mhm.
kinesiology, so, like, how important has it been for you to be able to have options on the table, um, in order to figure out this path of how you're going to do it for yourself?
Yeah, so for me, I would say I've just always kind of been like a very like kind of put actions behind like what I'm thinking, kind of like we were talking about earlier. So like when football was out of my life and I wasn't like didn't feel like I was living as like purposeful of a life, like I wasn't really pursuing anything. I didn't have anything that I was that passionate about. I was like, I can sit here and not have any passions, not have anything that like I'm really pursuing, or I can just go and keep trying different things until I find something and I'm like, "Oh, okay, like, I like this," you know what I mean? So um, that was just kind of the mindset I took towards it, and, it's more just kinda throwing yourself out there and seeing what happens. There may be one thing that it goes and it's also kind of like one of those pride things where you have to understand, like, you may do something and be completely unsuccessful at it, and then you're still gonna grow from that, so, like, you're still gonna get benefit out of it, and then, like, that's not the thing you wanna do rather than, like, procrastinating about it for 3 years and then, like, way down the line figuring out that you're not passionate. So, like, it's really more just throwing yourself out there until you find something that you really love and that you really think could, like, be a future for you. So, that was kind of the mindset I took.
I think that the other thing that can be said about this is it's important to note that it's okay to have more than one passion, right? And I think
Mhm,
that that's what encompasses your whole story of how you're doing it for yourself because you have multiple different passions that you are pursuing right now, and you're
mhm.
not pigeonholing yourself into one specific thing just because you feel like you have to have one thing that you're focused on, right?
Yeah,
There's so many people out there that feel like, "Oh, well, this has to be my focus and I have to put 100% into this." Well, you can have multiple things that you're putting 100% into, and you're doing
uh,
that.
yeah, I totally agree. Um, and especially right now being, like, just in college, I think, like, at this younger age, like high school, college, like, it's such a great time to just, like, really, like, figure out what do you like, what don't you like, and maybe it's not even like like, for me, I can kind of look at, like, okay, what did I like about quarterback? And then, like, and what did I like about football? And then, like, realize that that's also like, for example, for quarterback and, like, football and everything, I would say, like, a huge part of it that I liked was, like, being able to, I always wanted to be that guy on the team that, like, was lifting other people's heads up and was encouraging others and, um, was just kinda like that leader on the team, and then I realized, like, also with, like, training, that's why I like it. I'm able to, like, push this kid, I'm able to, um, like, be that kind of, like, positive voice in his head and, like, tell him, like, "You can do this," or whatever, so you just kind of realize, like, what kinda things really drive you, and then more and more over time, you can kinda, like, figure yourself out and, like, realize, "Okay, this is something I probably would like," or, "Okay, this is something that I probably wouldn't." So, the more you throw yourself out there, the more different things you try, you just end up learning, like, a ton about yourself from it, so
And I think it's, not just for you and the age that you are right now. Like, I think that's important for anybody,
Oh,
right?
yeah,
Like,
for sure.
you could be 45 and in a job that you hate, and you could go find something that you're actually passionate about and
Yeah.
maybe not turn it like, you don't have to be an entrepreneur, but you could find something that you're passionate about and then go and do that, chase that. Like, it could still be working for another company. Like, that's not to say that you have to be an entrepreneur, but you can find things that you're passionate about and you can do it really at any stage in your life. I think that you are just lucky to be in the position that you are, that you don't have, pressure of a family and kids and
Yeah.
having to provide. You really only have to provide, like, for yourself right now, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I would say even for somebody with a family, like, if you're not happy in the job that you're in right now, then maybe like and you wanna find something that you're happy about, maybe it's for a little while you do have to put in some extra work and you have to work your job, and then after work like, for let's say, for example, I, like, was 20 years older right now and I had some job I hated. Maybe I worked my job, and then at the end, every day after work, I go and train 2 athletes for 2 hours, and maybe I just cut, like, an hour of the time I would normally spend, like, watching TV to, I think there's always, like, if you want to find something that's, like, gonna make you happy, you can, like, find a way to do it if you really look for it and you really, like, put actions behind, like, those thoughts and those desires.
Yeah, I mean, I was telling you when we chatted before the show that there's a place that's literally right around the corner from me, and that's all that they do. Is like it this
Mhm.
is like a place where high school age athletes and some that are even probably like a little bit younger, like that's where they go and train and they have specific coaches and speed training and this like and it's a massive company. I mean, there's people that
Yeah.
come from Pennsylvania, Maryland, Delaware, all to go to this facility. So like
Mhm.
it coaching athletes is not something that's just like, "Oh yeah, you know, I there are people who do it on the side, but like there's a legitimate business that
Yeah.
could be made there."
Yeah, no, for sure.
So that kind of leads me into the question that, you know, you knew was coming, but with everything that you have going on, what would your one ideal situation, whatever that situation may be,
Mhm.
like what would it be in, you know, 3 years, 4 years, you're just out of college, and what are your goals for
Yeah.
that, like, same amount of time. So, your goals could be one thing, but, your ideal situation, like, where would you be when you graduate from
Mhm.
college?
Yeah, so kinda like we were saying earlier, since I'm pursuing all these different things, and I'm not really, like, pigeonholing myself into, like, one thing, I can't really sit here and say, like, in 4 years, I wanna, like, have this huge thing training athletes, or in 4 years, I want my podcast to be huge. Because it's really more I'm pursuing all these things, and then, like, I just think life's gonna kind of form one of these things, and one of these things is gonna be, like, the one that makes the most sense and the one that at the time I'm enjoying the most. But I would say that, like, my goal in 4 years would be to have my own company, whether that's, um, training athletes, or whether it's a podcast, or whether it's, something engineering related. Like, to have my own company is something that, like, I'm really passionate about, and, that I think would be really cool. So I would say that's really kind of like the goal with all these things. And I wouldn't even like really say it's like a money thing. Like, I'm not the type of person that's like, oh, I want to be rich one day and I want to have my own company. It's more just like I love like that. And this is like this sounds so weird, but I remember like even from football, I loved like being nervous before a game and like the pressure of it, and like just that whole like feeling of like just like the pressure of everything. So like I think you get a lot of that with like starting your own company. It's something that you can, if it's your own thing, like you're fully responsible for everything with it. So then like just kind of having that like self accountability with that, I think is really cool. So I would say that's my biggest goal, kind of with all this, is to start my own company and really just through all this, like keep like looking at myself 3 years ago, I've changed so much as a person. So then like seeing myself 4 years from now where I'm at, like, if I just keep trying all these different things, if I, because like, obviously, like, not everything's gonna work, so, like, through those failures, I'm gonna learn, like, a ton from them, so just seeing where I'm at 4 years, like, from a character standpoint and, like, from a have I started my own company, or, like, what am I doing at that point, I think is gonna be really cool.
The one thing that I did wanna ask you is you're testing and trying and tasting a lot of different things right now,
Mhm.
and when it gets to that point in 3 years, 4 years, 7 years, 15 years, who knows?
Yeah.
But when it gets to the point where you do have your own company, whether it be engineering, coaching athletes, how do you think you're going to make the transition from tasting and trying all different things to then pushing your chips all in on one thing?
Well I would say, like, for football, I did push all my chips in because 'cause I'd found that one thing that, like, I was really happy about, so, like, and really, like, passionate about. So I don't think it would be hard for me to drop, like, I honestly enjoy everything in my life right now so much. and it's just one of those things that like it's like which one of these things is going to end up like working out best for me. So I don't think it's really going to be hard to put all my chips in. I don't think I'll struggle with like losing the other things. It'll always just kind of be like a so like even if we look at like the quarterback thing, how I went from like safety to then I got to quarterback, like we could think like I could look at it and be like, okay, now I'm like quarterback, like I don't have to like work anymore. But then it's like, okay, well, how am I going to be the varsity quarterback? Then how am I going to be a college quarterback? Then how am I going to be the NFL quarterback? Then how am I going to be the best NFL quarterback? So there's always like kind of that next hump to crawl. Um, so I think that's like the biggest thing is always just kind of like looking at it from the mindset of like what's next and like and like whatever I'm doing, like what kind of impact am I having through that? Um, so yeah.
So maybe I should have worded it slightly different, but
Mhm.
how, like, do you think, or how do you think it's gonna be, like, do you think it's gonna be obvious? Like, "Oh, okay, this is it. Like, this is this is what I'm gonna put my chips all in on." Or do you think it's gonna be, I don't wanna say, like, wishy-washy, but, like, do you think it's
I
gonna be super cut and dry? Or
I
do you
think
think it's gonna be a difficult decision?
um I feel like it would be cut and dry. I think one like it would get to a point where the amount of like if something say I'm training athletes and I just have like hundreds of athletes that want to train with me. If I'm also doing a podcast and have an engineering job, I'm not going to have time to train those athletes. Um, so I think it would just come down to like a time thing where it's like if like this can be big, like it's at the point where it can be big. Now I need to like put all my chips in on that. Or if like before they're like before I make that transition, if I have time to pursue everything in my life with 100%, then why take something out? Like, there's no point in, you know what I mean? So that I think it'll just
Mhm,
get to a certain
mhm.
point where it's like, okay, I don't, and maybe it's I'm doing these three things, and maybe it's like, okay, these two things are really taking off, and this other one's taking up a bunch of time, and I'm not getting a ton out of it. I'm gonna take that one out, and now it's two things. So I think it's really just comes down to like time reward type thing, where like it. I think things will just get to a certain point where it'll be clear, like, okay, I'm getting so much joy and happiness and making such an impact out of this, and I'm not with this other thing. So I think it's just kind of like valuing it in that sense.
Yeah, okay. I got you. Yeah, that makes oh, I think it was just poor wording on my part, but,
No, you're good.
it totally makes sense now. So, but before I ask you, the last question that I ask a variation of all of my guests, but,
Mhm.
do me a favor and let people know where they can keep up with you and follow what's going on, because as I said to you before, you put it out there for us. You let us know that obviously you wanna finish college, you wanna graduate, but you want to be owning your own company, and you put some things out there that you want to happen, over the course of the next couple of years. So now we have an audience here that can help hold you accountable. So let these people know where they can find you and they can keep up with these things.
Yeah, for sure. So it's like my podcast, for example, it's on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, like just about wherever podcast could be, it is. And you can look up the Nick Keller podcast and it'll pop up. As far as social media, I would say the best place to find me is probably Instagram. You can look me up on there at Nick_Keller_12. And feel free to like shoot me a DM. Whether it's right when you see this or like if it's a couple months down the line and you're like, oh, I remember that one dude on there. I wonder what he's doing now. Like, shoot me a DM and be like, hey, what are you doing now? And if I'm not doing anything, hold me accountable. Like it. I love like when people reach out, and I love to talk to whoever. So those are, I would say if you're wanting to get in contact with me, Instagram's probably the best place to go.
For sure. And so the last question, and I ask it in a couple different forms, but for this episode, I think the way that the best way to do it is, what does it mean to you to be doing it for yourself?
Um, I would just say that I would say doing it for yourself just kind of means, like see, I don't know. I struggle with that because for me, I'm very big on, like, what impact am I having on other people? Um, so, like, for me, I don't know if it is like a I don't know. That's
So you are doing it for yourself because leaving an impact on people is something that gives you joy
mhm.
and it
Okay.
brings you an immense amount of joy, right? So
Yeah.
the fact that you coach athletes for the sake of coaching athletes because you enjoy the process and you enjoy working with them, right? Like
Gotcha.
you're doing it for yourself
Yeah,
by
yeah, yeah.
coaching those athletes. So doing it for yourself doesn't necessarily mean that you are forgetting everybody else and you are self-centered, right? And you're
Mhm.
focusing purely on something that's going to benefit you. You can be doing it for yourself and still helping other people, right?
Gotcha. Yeah. No, yeah, that makes
So,
total sense.
like, if you think about it that way, and if you think about like all of the passions that you're chasing, right?
Mhm. Yes.
What does it then mean to you to be doing it for yourself?
Yeah, I would say it's huge just, like, knowing that everything in your life, you're doing it totally for, like because you want to be doing that. I'm not doing it to, like, make anybody else happy. I'm not doing it for anybody else's approval. I'm doing it because I genuinely enjoy, like, whatever this thing is in my life. And I think if there's something that you have in your life that you're not like, that you don't enjoy doing it and you're not doing it for yourself, then, like, you should probably question, like, why is that thing in your life? And, like, why not find something that you really do enjoy? So for me, like, everything I'm pursuing and I really like the way you explain that, I would say everything I'm doing in my life is, like, I'm definitely doing it for, like for myself and for, like, just kind of, like, me as a person in my, I don't know, I'm having trouble explaining this. I really like the way you kind of, like, reworded or, like, explained what you mean by do it for yourself,
Mhm.
um, but it like, I don't know.
No, I think you hit it. Like you got it.
Okay.
You, you are doing it and these are things that you're working on and things that you're chasing because they're things that you want, right? And so
Yeah.
even though like I said, even though coaching athletes like that's something that you really want to do, but it's also
Mhm.
something that's benefiting others.
Exactly.
And the other thing is you're doing it because it's something that you want to do. You didn't go
Mhm.
to Texas A&M to do engineering or just go to college in general because it was something that your parents were telling you that you had to do, or you didn't play
Yeah.
football because it was something that your parents were telling you had to do, right? Like these are all things that you were passionate about. You pursued them because they were things that you wanted to do. And it wasn't
Yeah.
selfish. Like think about coaching athletes. There's nothing selfish about coaching athletes, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But you're still
No,
doing
I
it for
totally agree.
yourself because it's something that you're so passionate about.
Yeah.
You see what
No, I
I'm
like
saying?
that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that
So,
makes total sense.
all right, man. Well, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to come and hang out with me and jam on the podcast. I really appreciate you, giving up some of your time to come on here, and that's definitely something that it does not go unnoticed. So, thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me on. It's been super cool to just kind of reflect on everything in my past and how that's, like, got me to where I am right now, and I think it's gonna be really cool to see, like, we kind of talked about my, like, whatever that was, 4 or 5-year transition. I think it's gonna be really cool to see that next one or whatever. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man, for sure. And the other thing that's super cool about it is that this is now gonna, well, not now, not right now, but when this goes up, it's gonna live on the internet, you know? And
Mhm.
so I'm sure when you were getting ready and applying for colleges, they gave you that same statement that once it's on the internet, it never goes away, which
Yeah.
can be a burden, right? But it for something like this, like it can be cool because now you have this story out there, and who knows, potentially 4 or 5, 10 years from now, you'll be able to go back and look at it and
Yeah.
listen to
No,
it
that'd be
at
really
least.
cool.
So
So
right on, man.
cool, cool, cool.
All right, my friend. That is it. That is my interview with Nick Keller. And the thing that I find with a lot of my guests when I initially reach out to them to be on the podcast is they tell me that they don't have a story. They tell me that they don't have something that could potentially motivate others or be inspiring. And it's something that I have to show them that they do have a story. And at the end of the podcast, there, when I asked Nick what it meant to him to be doing it for himself, you could see how he knows that he's doing it for himself, but he just has a little bit of difficulty to put that into words. And so I was happy to help him come to that realization. And that's something that I really enjoy about the podcast and about sharing other stories. So I hope that you enjoyed this interview with Nick. I wanted to hold Nick accountable to his goals. And so I'm looking forward to continuing to follow him and see where he is within the next few years of this podcast so that we can potentially sit down, look back at it and say, okay, did you follow through on the things that you had said you were going to follow through on? And it's something that I enjoy having the ability to do with this podcast. So again, I hope that you enjoyed this. If you've made it this far, please do me a huge favor. Leave a review on the app that you're using to consume this podcast. It's something that only takes a couple minutes, but it's something that is really, really going to help me out. That is all I have for you. Until next week, I hope you enjoy some of this nice weather that we are having here, and I look forward to having you back.